I smiled as my husband accepted a standing ovation from the board of directors. Seconds later, the celebration froze when the giant screen behind him displayed documents carrying my forged signature beside millions of dollars in hidden loans. The same man who had laughed at me in flawless French, believing I understood nothing, suddenly realized every careless insult had been carefully collected. Before the police entered the room, he looked at me once, searching for mercy, but all he found was silence. Before we begin, dear friends, please help me. Your subscription is very valuable to me. Please subscribe to the channel for more stories like this. The story truly began 6 months earlier. My name is Wilhelmina. Most people described me as a quiet housewife. They saw elegant dresses, polite smiles, and afternoons spent arranging flowers. They never noticed the finance textbooks beside my bed or the years I spent studying international business before choosing family over ambition. Julian loved that misunderstanding. It made him feel taller. He introduced me as if I were a decorative piece instead of his equal. That evening, the Grand Lumiere Hotel glittered beneath crystal chandeliers worth more than many homes. The air carried expensive perfume, roasted truffle, aged wine, and polished cedar. Julian wore a navy Italian suit costing nearly $8,000. His silver watch reflected every light across the ballroom. I wore a simple emerald gown he once claimed looked modest enough for a business dinner. Our guests included investors from Paris, Geneva, and Montreal. Julian laughed easily, shaking hands, promising impossible returns. Then his French partner complimented me. Julian leaned closer and answered in French with complete confidence. She is just an ordinary housewife. She knows nothing about business. Smile politely. She looks prettier when she stays quiet. Several executives laughed. I smiled. Julian mistook my silence for ignorance. He had forgotten something important. My grandmother was born in Lyon. French was the first language spoken inside our family home. I answered the waiter in perfect French, requesting sparkling water from a specific vineyard near Annecy. The waiter nodded respectfully. Julian never noticed. His attention remained fixed on impressing wealthy strangers. During dessert, he discussed confidential contracts without lowering his voice. Numbers floated through the conversation. $24 million. Offshore transfers. Bridge financing. Emergency guarantees. Those phrases settled inside my memory. On the drive home, he hummed happily. I watched city lights pass across the windshield. For the first time in 12 years of marriage, something inside me became perfectly still. Not heartbreak. Not anger. Clarity. Real clarity arrives quietly. It does not scream. It calculates. The following morning, Julian kissed my forehead before leaving for headquarters. His cologne lingered in the hallway long after the front door closed. I poured fresh coffee, opened my laptop, and began reviewing every financial document I could legally access. I believed I would uncover arrogance. I never imagined I was about to discover a crime that carried my own forged name across every page. The first document looked ordinary. A quarterly banking summary. Then I noticed a signature that resembled mine but lacked one tiny habit. I always crossed the final letter with a slight upward stroke. This signature ended flat. Most people would never see the difference. I saw it immediately. I downloaded every available statement. Loan agreements appeared one after another. Credit facilities. Asset guarantees. Personal indemnities. Each carried my name. Each claimed I had willingly accepted enormous liability. The total exceeded $18,400,000. My stomach tightened. Not because of the money. Because someone had practiced becoming me. I refused to confront Julian. People who forge signatures rarely stop with one lie. Instead, I created a secure folder on an encrypted drive. Every file received a timestamp. Every screenshot was duplicated onto 2 separate storage devices. One remained inside a locked safe beneath the floor of my dressing room. The other rested inside a safety deposit box registered only in my maiden name. Then I called my oldest university friend, Eleanor. She had become a forensic document examiner. Without revealing everything, I asked whether she could compare genuine signatures against suspected forgeries. She agreed. 2 days later, she stared through a magnifying lens before quietly removing her glasses. "These signatures were traced," she whispered. "Whoever did this practiced repeatedly before signing the final copies." My pulse never changed. I simply thanked her and requested a written report. That report became the first brick in the wall surrounding Julian. The second arrived unexpectedly. While organizing household insurance papers, I found an unfamiliar key hidden inside Julian's golf bag. Attached was a brass tag engraved with 3 numbers. 814. The key belonged to a private storage facility across town. Access required identification, so I could not simply walk inside. Instead, I hired a licensed private investigator named Marcus Hale. His daily rate was $1,200. Expensive. Worth every cent. Marcus never asked unnecessary questions. Within a week, he photographed Julian visiting Unit 814 twice after midnight. The second visit lasted almost 3 hours. When Julian returned home, his shoes carried fine gray warehouse dust instead of the polished marble residue from his office garage. Marcus also discovered something stranger. Julian's company accountant had quietly resigned 6 months earlier and signed a strict confidentiality agreement. People do not disappear after healthy businesses. They disappear after dangerous ones. Every answer created 2 new questions. I continued smiling across dinner tables. I continued laughing beside Julian's colleagues. Every performance convinced him I remained exactly what he believed. An ordinary housewife. Meanwhile, the evidence kept growing, and with every document, photograph, and expert opinion, the trap became impossible to escape. I opened a fresh notebook and listed every person connected to the loans, every bank manager, every attorney, every notary, every transfer date. Patterns emerged with astonishing precision. Julian believed complexity protected him. Instead, complexity created fingerprints that even the finest lawyers would struggle to explain under oath. Before everyone watching. One evening, Marcus called with unusual excitement. He had finally identified the attorney who witnessed several suspicious documents carrying my supposed signature. The lawyer had retired unexpectedly only 3 weeks after the loans were approved. Public records showed he had purchased a beachfront villa in Portugal with cash despite reporting modest annual income for years. That coincidence deserved attention. Marcus arranged discreet surveillance while I contacted another specialist, a forensic accountant named Rebecca Sloan, whose reputation for untangling corporate fraud was legendary. She reviewed every statement, transfer, and guarantee I had collected. After 2 days, she pushed her chair back, folded her hands, and looked directly into my eyes. She said the numbers revealed a carefully layered scheme designed to hide dead inside shell companies before shifting the liability onto me. Julian had never intended to repay those loans. He intended to sacrifice his own wife if everything collapsed. Hearing those words felt strangely peaceful. Fear disappeared completely. I knew exactly what I was fighting. Rebecca helped me prepare detailed financial charts linking every transfer through 6 separate corporations. The trail eventually returned to Julian's holding company despite numerous attempts to disguise ownership. Every spreadsheet contained source references, transaction numbers, banking timestamps, and certified copies. Nothing relied upon assumptions. Everything relied upon evidence. While Rebecca handled the financial analysis, Marcus uncovered another devastating discovery. Julian maintained a private apartment downtown under the name of a consulting firm. Inside that apartment, he hosted confidential meetings away from company headquarters. Visitors included 2 executives, the retired attorney, and a banker responsible for approving the fraudulent loans. Marcus legally photographed every arrival and departure from public property. He never crossed the line separating investigation from trespassing. I admired his discipline. Good evidence survives courtroom scrutiny because it respects the law. Bad evidence destroys otherwise perfect cases. Meanwhile, Julian grew increasingly arrogant. At dinner, he bragged about expanding into European markets. He joked that ordinary people could never understand sophisticated finance. Every mocking comment reminded me why patience mattered. My revenge would not arrive through shouting across a dining table. It would arrive through contracts, testimony, certified records, and undeniable truth. I quietly scheduled appointments with an independent banking ombudsman, a commercial litigation attorney, and a senior investigator from the Financial Crimes Division. None of them received the complete file immediately. Each received only enough verified material to confirm the seriousness of the allegations. Their reactions matched Rebecca's. Calm expressions slowly hardened into disbelief. Before leaving each meeting, I asked the same question. If additional evidence confirmed intentional forgery, conspiracy, and fraudulent borrowing, could everything be pursued simultaneously instead of separately? Every professional answered with the same single word. Absolutely. That answer marked the moment Julian's carefully constructed empire began collapsing, although he remained completely unaware that every confident step he took carried him closer to the edge of a cliff already crumbling beneath his polished shoes without mercy whatsoever. The next phase required patience that bordered on obsession. I stopped thinking like a wife and started thinking like an investigator. Every receipt entered a spreadsheet. Every phone call received a timestamp. Every meeting Julian attended was matched against travel records, hotel invoices, and company expense reports. Small inconsistencies appeared everywhere. A breakfast meeting billed in Chicago happened on the same morning his security badge opened the executive garage in New York. A consulting invoice for $380,000 was approved by a company that had been dissolved 8 months earlier. One false entry alone proved very little. 50 carefully documented false entries told an entirely different story. Rebecca introduced me to a cyberforensics specialist named Daniel Ortiz. He legally examined metadata contained in electronic copies of the loan agreements. Hidden within the files were revision histories that Julian had never bothered to erase. Several documents had been created on a laptop registered to his executive assistant before being edited from Julian's office computer late at night. Even more damaging, the digital signatures had been inserted only minutes after my supposed handwritten signatures appeared. The timeline was impossible to explain honestly. I never celebrated early. Overconfidence destroys more cases than weak evidence. Instead, I kept building. Marcus eventually identified a former employee willing to speak confidentially. Her name was Claire. She had worked in the finance department until she questioned unusual transfers between affiliated companies. Within 2 weeks, she had been dismissed for what the company described as poor performance. She quietly handed me copies of internal emails she had preserved after fearing something illegal was happening. Those messages showed executives discussing the need to obtain my signature, whether voluntarily or otherwise. One message from Julian chilled me completely. If she refuses, we will handle it another way. There it was. Not suspicion. Not implication. Intent. Claire signed a sworn statement before my attorney. Every page was notarized. Every attachment was authenticated. My legal team expanded overnight. A commercial fraud specialist joined the case. So did a securities attorney and a former federal prosecutor serving as private counsel. Their fees exceeded $100,000 before the first filing, but every dollar purchased preparation instead of panic. Julian noticed none of it. He remained convinced I spent my afternoons attending charity luncheons and decorating the house. Then came his biggest mistake. He announced an international acquisition worth nearly $90 million. The deal would require a triumphant presentation before investors, directors, lenders, journalists, and regulators. He personally invited me to attend because, as he joked, every successful man needed his smiling wife beside him for photographs. I accepted immediately. That single invitation gave my attorneys exactly what they needed. A public stage. A room filled with witnesses. And a man whose pride would prevent him from walking away before the truth appeared on the largest screen he had ever stood beside. The board meeting was scheduled for 9 o'clock on a Monday morning inside the company's new headquarters. Television crews waited outside. Financial journalists filled the front rows. Major shareholders arrived carrying leather portfolios and confident smiles. Julian walked through the lobby like a conquering king. He greeted directors by name, laughed with investors, and paused only long enough to kiss my cheek for the cameras. His expensive cologne smelled of cedarwood and bergamot. I smiled back exactly as expected. Hidden inside my handbag rested a slim encrypted drive containing thousands of verified documents. My attorneys already possessed identical copies. So did the financial crimes investigators. Nothing depended on a single device. If one failed, 10 others remained. At precisely 9:15, Julian stepped onto the stage. A massive screen illuminated behind him, displaying the company's logo beside the words Global Expansion Strategy. Applause echoed across the auditorium. He thanked the investors, praised his executive team, and announced projected profits exceeding $200 million over the next 3 years. Then he invited questions. That was the signal. My lead attorney quietly stood. He introduced himself, identified his law firm, and informed the chairperson that urgent evidence concerning financial fraud directly affecting shareholders required immediate presentation before the meeting continued. The room fell silent. Julian laughed. He called it a misunderstanding. He suggested postponing the discussion. The chairperson refused. Company bylaws required credible allegations involving executive misconduct to be addressed immediately. The screen went black. Seconds later, the first image appeared. A side-by-side comparison of my genuine signature and the forged versions. Then Eleanor's certified forensic report. Then Rebecca's financial analysis tracing every fraudulent transfer. Then Daniel's metadata timeline showing exactly when each document had been created and altered. Every slide contained dates, account numbers, transaction references, digital timestamps, certified authentication. No opinions. Only facts. Julian's confident smile disappeared. The next video began playing. Hidden security footage showed him entering the private storage facility after midnight. Another clip displayed him meeting the retired attorney. Photographs documented every visit. Then Claire's sworn statement appeared. Finally, an email filled the giant screen. If she refuses, we will handle it another way. The words remained visible for nearly 30 seconds. Nobody spoke. Several directors slowly turned toward Julian. One investor removed his glasses and stared in disbelief. The chief financial officer quietly lowered his head. The chairperson requested an explanation. Julian tried to blame subordinates. He claimed documents had been prepared without his knowledge. Unfortunately for him, the final presentation destroyed that defense completely. Daniel displayed login records proving Julian's personal executive account had approved every critical revision. His digital authorization appeared beside each transaction. Every excuse collapsed before it left his mouth. When uniformed investigators entered the auditorium carrying official warrants, nobody looked surprised. The applause that had welcomed Julian only minutes earlier had been replaced by complete silence. For the first time since our marriage began, he understood exactly what my silence had always concealed. Not weakness. Patience. Investigators escorted Julian away before the meeting officially ended. Cameras waiting outside captured every second. By lunchtime, every major financial network carried the same headline. Celebrated billionaire executive accused of orchestrating massive fraud against his own wife and shareholders. Trading in the company's stock was immediately suspended pending investigation. Banks froze corporate credit lines. Lenders demanded repayment. Partners canceled negotiations. The empire he had spent 15 years building began collapsing within hours. The legal consequences unfolded exactly as my attorneys predicted. Courts issued emergency orders preventing Julian from selling property, transferring assets, or accessing offshore accounts. Independent auditors seized financial records. Regulators questioned executives separately, comparing testimony against the evidence already submitted. Lies that sounded convincing during private conversations became impossible under documented examination. Julian attempted one final move. He requested a private meeting. Against my attorney's advice, I agreed, provided the meeting occurred inside their conference room with cameras recording everything. He entered wearing the same confidence I had once admired, although it now looked exhausted. Dark circles surrounded his eyes. His expensive suit hung loosely across his shoulders. He apologized. Not for forging my signature. Not for insulting me. He apologized for getting caught. He insisted everything had been done for our future. He claimed success would have erased every problem. He even suggested we could still rebuild together if I withdrew my cooperation. I listened quietly. When he finished, I placed a single folder on the table. Inside rested copies of every insulting message he had exchanged with his partners, every forged document, every hidden transfer, and every email discussing me as if I were nothing more than a disposable insurance policy. Then I spoke. You never lost your company because I exposed you. You lost at the moment you believed honesty was optional. He lowered his head. There was nothing left to say. Months later, the court delivered its judgment. Multiple convictions followed. Heavy financial penalties consumed nearly everything Julian owned. Insurance refused coverage because the fraud had been intentional. Creditors claimed remaining assets. Luxury cars disappeared. Vacation homes were auctioned. His penthouse overlooked the city for the final time before new owners received the keys. As for me, I signed the final settlement, reclaimed my maiden name, and quietly purchased a small vineyard overlooking the sea my grandmother loved. Every morning began with birdsong instead of arguments. Every evening ended with gratitude instead of suspicion. Peace, I discovered, was worth far more than revenge, although justice had opened the door to it. Sometimes visitors asked whether I regretted destroying the life we had built together. I always answered honestly. I destroyed nothing. Truth simply removed the disguise protecting his choices. Real love cannot survive deception, but real self-respect grows stronger every time courage defeats fear forever and hope quietly takes its rightful place. If you found this story compelling, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel for more stories like this. Let me know in the comments what you would have done. Life settled into a quieter rhythm. The vineyard flourished because every decision rested on patience rather than ego. I hired local families at fair wages and restored an abandoned stone farmhouse. The place slowly became a destination for travelers seeking peace instead of luxury. Every contract was reviewed twice. Every payment was transparent. Every employee understood that trust was the foundation of everything. One autumn afternoon, Rebecca visited carrying fresh court documents. Julian had filed an appeal. Neither of us looked surprised. People who spend years escaping responsibility rarely surrender quickly. Still, the appeal collapsed within weeks because the evidence remained overwhelming. The judges specifically praised the forensic analysis and the meticulous preservation of records. Their written opinions stated that deliberate deception had been proven beyond reasonable dispute. News outlets eventually lost interest. Another scandal replaced ours on the front pages. I welcomed the silence. Healing does not happen under flashing cameras. It happens during ordinary mornings when coffee tastes better than bitterness and laughter returns without effort. Several former employees contacted me after the verdict. Some apologized for staying silent. Others admitted they had feared losing their jobs. I accepted sincere apologies without pretending the past never happened. Forgiveness required accountability before reconciliation. That lesson became the guiding principle of my new life. Whenever young entrepreneurs visited the vineyard, asking how I rebuilt after betrayal, I refused to present myself as fearless. Courage was never the absence of pain. Courage was choosing disciplined action while pain remained. I encouraged them to document agreements carefully, respect honest partners, and never ignore uncomfortable questions simply because success appeared close. Months later, Claire accepted an executive position at another company where integrity mattered more than appearances. Marcus expanded his investigation firm and occasionally sent postcards from assignments around the world. Eleanor continued exposing forged documents for courts that depended upon precision instead of assumptions. Rebecca became one of my closest friends. Every anniversary of the verdict, we shared dinner overlooking the sea, toasted quiet victories, and remembered that justice had been earned through persistence rather than luck. Sometimes I opened the old evidence archive stored inside the bank vault. Not because I missed the battle, but because it reminded me how easily confidence can become arrogance. Each file represented one decision to remain calm instead of reacting emotionally. Had I confronted Julian after that first insult in French, he would have destroyed evidence, manipulated witnesses, and escaped responsibility. Silence had never been surrender. Silence had been strategy. The vineyard eventually produced its finest vintage. On the first bottle, I placed a simple label carrying only my family name. Nothing extravagant. Nothing boastful. Just an honest reminder that reputations should be built slowly and protected faithfully. When visitors asked about the meaning behind that label, I smiled, poured another glass, and said every harvest rewards the people willing to care for what truly matters, even after the harshest storms. My future belonged entirely to truth, freedom, resilience, gratitude, family, hope, always, forward, together. Life settled into a quieter rhythm. The vineyard flourished because every decision rested on patience rather than ego. I hired local families at fair wages and restored an abandoned stone farmhouse. The place slowly became a destination for travelers seeking peace instead of luxury. Every contract was reviewed twice. Every payment was transparent. Every employee understood that trust was the foundation of everything. One autumn afternoon, Rebecca visited carrying fresh court documents. Julian had filed an appeal. Neither of us looked surprised. People who spend years escaping responsibility rarely surrender quickly. Still, the appeal collapsed within weeks because the evidence remained overwhelming. The judges specifically praised the forensic analysis and the meticulous preservation of records. Their written opinion stated that deliberate deception had been proven beyond reasonable dispute. News outlets eventually lost interest. Another scandal replaced ours on the front pages. I welcomed the silence. Healing does not happen under flashing cameras. It happens during ordinary mornings when coffee tastes better than bitterness and laughter returns without effort. Several former employees contacted me after the verdict. Some apologized for staying silent. Others admitted they had feared losing their jobs. I accepted sincere apologies without pretending the past never happened. Forgiveness required accountability before reconciliation. That lesson became the guiding principle of my new life. Whenever young entrepreneurs visited the vineyard, asking how I rebuilt after betrayal, I refused to present myself as fearless. Courage was never the absence of pain. Courage was choosing disciplined action while pain remained. I encouraged them to document agreements carefully, respect honest partners, and never ignore uncomfortable questions simply because success appeared close. Months later, Claire accepted an executive position at another company where integrity mattered more than appearances. Marcus expanded his investigation firm and occasionally sent postcards from assignments around the world. Eleanor continued exposing forged documents for courts that depended upon precision instead of assumptions. Rebecca became one of my closest friends. Every anniversary of the verdict, we shared dinner overlooking the sea, toasted quiet victories, and remembered that justice had been earned through persistence rather than luck. Sometimes I opened the old evidence archive stored inside the bank vault. Not because I missed the battle, but because it reminded me how easily confidence can become arrogance. Each file represented one decision to remain calm instead of reacting emotionally. Had I confronted Julian after that first insult in French, he would have destroyed evidence, manipulated witnesses, and escaped responsibility. Silence had never been surrender. Silence had been strategy. The vineyard eventually produced its finest vintage. On the first bottle, I placed a simple label carrying only my family name. Nothing extravagant. Nothing boastful. Just an honest reminder that reputations should be built slowly and protected faithfully. When visitors asked about the meaning behind that label, I smiled, poured another glass, and said every harvest rewards the people willing to care for what truly matters, even after the harshest storms. My future belonged entirely to truth, freedom, resilience, gratitude, family, hope, always, forward, together.